Hey guys, what's going on? It's Filmington. In this video, we're going to talk about investing in sealed retail wax. You know, this is something that a lot of people did successfully if they bought in 2020, 2019, 2018. The earlier the better. But in today's environment, we're dealing with negative returns for a lot of sealed products. We're dealing with modest or low returns, and I think we're going to see that in the future. I don't think we're going to see the abnormal growth that we saw in the pandemic period for most sealed products. That includes retail. So in this video, we're going to break down the types of attributes that I believe you should look at when you're looking to invest in sealed retail. Also some risk factors, maybe some return expectations. And yeah, so let's get this started. So first of all, I do think it can be a good investment, or else I probably wouldn't have made this video as long as it is. I'm guessing it's going to be over 10 minutes. I think it can be a good investment, but you have to be selective. And you've got to focus on premium products. So for baseball, that's going to be Bowman, Topps Chrome. One of the most important variables is the checklist. And you're going to have a good idea of that at the beginning, at the get-go. But you don't know how well those players are going to perform until after 6 months, after a year, after a couple years, then you're getting a better idea of that. But you're going to want that checklist to be pretty strong at the start, and you're going to want to focus on premium products. You know, there are some retail exclusive releases like the Bowman Mega Topps Chrome update. So those are going to be strong products as well. They don't have to have like a hobby counterpart, although most of them do. Now, talked about some of the premium products. Now, what are some of the non-premium products? That could be Bowman Platinum. That could be Topps Stadium Club. You know, a lot of the Panini releases, to be frank, you know, those just don't have the same track record of success as some of like the Bowman, even Bowman Chrome Mega Box. Now, Bowman is kind of hit or miss based on the year a little bit with regards to how good the blasters are, but over time they performed pretty well if you look at secondary market values. Not so much with 2021 though. One of the things that you're going to have to think about is, what is the difference between, say if this retail product that you're looking at has like a hobby configuration as well, you know, what are the differences between the two products with regards to like the contents, the makeup of the products? So, you know, maybe the hobby release has autograph possibilities. Maybe you can pull some serial number cards. Maybe you can pull like downtowns or some funky inserts with some of the other sports. So how is the retail configuration different? What is it missing? You know, Panini Prism Football doesn't have the ability to pull numbered cards anymore, I don't believe. With Bowman Baseball, for the most part, you're going to be pulling green parallels or some of the newer kind of, maybe some like gold shimmers. You can only pull like a certain amount of parallels in Bowman retail. So what's the difference? And also, what's the difference of the cost of a card, like the per card cost from retail to hobby? What I've seen, you know, in the past is if you're getting close to like 80% of the cost per card, for most products that doesn't make sense. A lot of time you want to be closer to like 67%. So effectively, you're getting 50% more cards, or 1.5x the amount of cards or more for your retail dollar spent versus hobby. But it all depends on the product. So one of the things that you'll want to look into is, one of my recent videos was on the Blowout Forum sentiment indicator. You know, what are people saying that have opened this retail product? Not the hobby product, but now we're talking retail. You know, are they satisfied with what's being pulled out of those? Or do they plan to invest in them long term because they've really liked, you know, what they've seen watching other breaks? Have they opened a bunch and they plan to open some more? Or are they like, well, you know, the price here doesn't make sense, so I'm kind of looking forward to another product release and I'm just going to move on. You know, hopefully this is a product that has some legacy. So we talked about premium products, and the ones that I brought up have been around for numerous years for the most part. Bowman Chrome Mega is fairly new. But you want to understand what the last year's product has done performance-wise. You know, has it doubled in price? Has it stayed flat? You can even look at a product from 2 years ago, and you have to ask yourself, well, what's different? So we talked about one of the biggest variables being the checklist and the performance of that checklist. Well, another big variable is, and there's sort of two things here. There's the total print run of the product, and sometimes it's hard to calculate for retail. You can get an idea if it jumped based on if there are any new SKUs, any new configurations. Maybe this year there's, cellos or value packs. Last year there were only mega boxes or blasters. It's the total print run, but also the change from the previous year. So sometimes on Blowout, they break it down, they look at the pack odds, and they can get, if not the total number of, say, blaster cases produced, they'll get some sort of an estimation, and they'll be able to kind of tell, like, okay, roughly print runs went up 30 to 40% for retail from the previous year. So that's very important. And again, look back at Blowout forums, see what people say, watch breaks. It's just a lot easier sometimes to kind of watch breaks and read sentiment versus opening it yourself, and you're only going off kind of a small sample if you're just going off of your own sort of anecdotal experience. But you want to find out, what else, how do they counter some of the dilution of the rip? Do they add parallels to it? Did they take away certain things that were in the product the year before? How have they watered down the product? Other than just an increased print run from the year before. Something you'll also want to consider is if these products are kind of hanging around on shelves for a while. Is there abundance of them at your local Walmart? Are they hanging around for days, if not weeks, if not months, at like Walmart.com or Dick's Sporting Goods or any website? It doesn't have to be all of them, just a few will show that the SRP price, a good chance that secondary market value, once people pick up more and more of this product, will dip below the SRP. It doesn't mean that a year from now it's a dead product and it's not investable. It's just a hurdle to overcome, especially if you do pay the SRP price. So the SRP price doesn't guarantee a floor, and what we've seen over the last few years, Topps, Panini as well, they've increased the SRP for certain products, in some cases like multiple times from one year to the next to the next. And my viewpoint on this is not necessarily like a good thing if the SRP is higher. I think it's actually worse because that's going to cause fewer people to pick up the product to open it. It's going to cause fewer people to pick it up to invest in it, especially in the short term if they're paying close to that SRP. And I think, Topps Chrome Update last year came out at $50. Now it's probably selling for closer to 35 on eBay, and I think maybe if it came out at 30, I think you would see the price today be higher. More of it would get opened, and I've talked about this before in my videos, but long term, that's what you want. And that's really going to add to that long-term performance. That's going to be the key driver of that, for that supply to shrink each year as more and more people open the product. People could pull this stuff off the market and then stash it in their inventories. But at the end of the day, high prices are the cure for high prices. Meaning if you start to see that price tick up because people want the product, but there's really a lot out there just in people's, storage units or basements, well, more and more people are going to bring out that product to sell it and take advantage of those high prices. And that's going to create resistance. You want to minimize that resistance by shrinking the supply. You want people to open that product. So we talked about this a little bit earlier in that you should be comparing this year's release versus last year's release, and maybe the release before that, and comparing, demand-related stuff. So checklists, supply-related stuff, print runs, or the print run change, as well as the price-related stuff. We talked about SRPs. But you should also look at one last thing, and what that is macro conditions. This year versus the year the other product that you're comparing it to was released. So in this case, there's a lot that's changed between this year and last year. There's a lot that's changed between this year and 2 years ago. So you have to factor that in because, again, it's important that people open this. And the velocity of the rip, in my opinion, is one of the biggest reasons why you shouldn't just go nuts and open a big allocation in any product that's come out this year. The health of the average U.S. consumer has deteriorated this year. You've got inflation running rampant. It's outpacing wage growth in this country. You've got disposable income that is shrinking. You've got credit card spending, which is increasing. And if the Fed gets their way with higher interest rates on variable debt, that's going to start to slow down. You've got employment, which is likely to decline if, again, the Fed gets their way. So you have to ask yourself, how are all of these conditions going to affect this product being opened versus 2020, this same product versus 2021 versus even 2019? It's just very different. But we still don't want to lose sight of the two most important factors, and that is checklist, demand, and print run supply. In the print run, you want to look at it on an absolute basis, and you want to look at it compared to the previous year. And you want to look at retail if you can. You want to isolate retail away from hobby. When you do that, if Fanatics does what a lot of people think they're going to do, not today, probably not tomorrow or the next week, but maybe down the line, what they're going to do to try to 10x the hobby, which is probably at this point unrealistic, but say if they want to 3x the hobby, what you'll see, and what we've seen a little bit already, is disproportionate increases in the print run for retail, meaning on a year-to-year basis, the overall print run, hobby plus retail, might only be up 15%, but maybe hobby is just 10% and maybe retail is like 25% from the previous year. So that's something that you want to be very cautioned about. Understanding that maybe Fanatics doesn't intend on retail being an investable product. If not now, then maybe in the next few years. Another thing to look out for, just a tidbit of information, be careful to pay up for retail before hobby's released. So in a lot of cases, you'll see the retail hitting the shelves and maybe hobby's a little bit delayed if there is a hobby equivalent of that product. So understand that people that really want those singles that generally would only buy hobby, you're going to be in the market with them competing for that retail product. And because of that, that might increase the prices. So just be cautious of that. Now, with regards to pre-ordering retail, if you're going to pre-order it and it's going to be at a higher price than SRP or what you think SRP will be or last year's SRP, it's risky, right? Because you're not going to know what the print run jump will be. And like we said, the print run jump for retail might be higher than it is for hobby. So, real price discovery happens after the product's released. And what you see with retail versus hobby is that there tends to be a bit more volatility in the short term. And I think a lot of this is because with hobby products, the prices are being controlled a little bit by distributors, by hobby shops. With retail products, assuming that they're getting cleaned off the shelves real quickly, the prices are being set by flippers that have short-term intentions, as well as, distributors and shops too that do get allocations of that retail product. But because you've got that flipper element, it could mean that not as well capitalized and they might not be able to hold the product for a long period of time. So like anything, just like hobby, you're going to see volatility in that first month. It's especially going to be pronounced first month or two after release for that product. So if you're going to go in, I would probably recommend averaging in, dollar cost averaging, to manage some risk. I would also recommend that you diversify. You don't just pick one product. I think it'd be silly to dump all your eggs in one basket, even if you've done the research, just because a lot could happen, right? So you might want to look at similar products, maybe a different year with a different checklist. A few last things I want to bring up. Generally, hobby is going to outperform retail over the long term on a percentage basis. Doesn't mean that retail won't do well. There's also going to be exceptions where retail outperforms hobby. Kind of depends on, again, what are the contents, what are the differences between hobby and retail, and the starting prices from which those come out at. Something you have to understand also is who's opening this product. What's the persona that's opening this product? How do breakers make the most money? Breakers will make the most money by opening high-end products. Ideally, the fewer cards, the better. The fewer packs, the better, because it's easier for them to move on, and they understand the difference of return on time for them to focus on a blaster or a case of blasters versus a box of National Treasures football or Topps Dynasty baseball, where there's not really a whole lot of work in doing that, and it's also a lot easier to fill in some cases. If it's just one card, perfect. Makes their job a lot easier. Another thing you have to think about is a year from now, 2 years from now, what are the chances that the group breaker will want to open this release? Got to be very reasonable with return expectations. We talked about it a little bit at the beginning, but we're probably over the period of abnormal growth. And in most cases, you've got to be more reasonable. Modest expectations, slow growth, maybe 10, maybe 50% return on the high side on a year-to-year basis versus the 75 to 150% returns that I think a lot of people were seeing in 2019, 2020, 2021 even. So I went to a restaurant on my birthday and it was packed. And it was a Tuesday night. And I was so surprised at what I saw that I called my dad the next day and I asked him, I'm like, Dad, why are people spending money right now? Why are people acting like the economy's fine? Is this their savings that they're spending? Or are they just leveraging their credit card more in order to keep that constant quality of life going? And before I let him answer, I said, wait a second. It doesn't matter because the Fed reaction is the same. They want that behavior to stop. So, flash forward, a lot of people are expecting inflation to be lower, under control maybe within the next year or two. Most people aren't buying retail wax with the intention of holding it sealed and investing in it. Most people are buying it to open it. It's a cheap rip. What's going to happen when prices fall a year from now or 2 years from now? We've already seen interest rates being higher have an effect on alternative assets, investments. But we're not talking about investments here. We're talking about retail wax, which usually doesn't fit into that. So I could definitely see SRPs on retail products coming down a year from now, 2 years from now, versus where they are today. And what is that going to mean for the retail products that came out this year at higher SRP prices? At the end of the day, if the checklist pans out, you probably won't get crushed, but hopefully you learned something. Take care. Filmington out.